It took just 72 hours to erase one of China's fastest rising stars from the entire industry. At the beginning of August 2021, Zhang Zhehan was everywhere, leading the sensation created by word of honor, securing more than 260 million yuan in brand endorsements and becoming the face of a new wave of crossover idols who could dominate both acting and music. Yet within 3 days, every trace of his career was wiped out. A set of old photos resurfaced online, igniting a firestorm that grew too fast to contain. Hashtags exploded, media outlets rushed to amplify the outrage, and corporations panicked as if they had been waiting for a signal. By the time the sun rose on the third day, his songs were gone. His dramas were taken down, commercials vanished, and his name itself became a trigger for automated censorship. No explanation from him was allowed to spread. No official investigation was released, and no space existed for a second perspective. The velocity was unprecedented, not just for Chinese entertainment, but for any global industry. This video unravels how those 72 hours unfolded, who benefited from the chaos, and why his fall happened with a level of coordination that looked far bigger than a simple scandal. Because behind the headlines lies a quiet machinery powerful enough to bury a multi-million-dollar career before the world even understood what was happening. The chain reaction that would end Zhang Zhehan's career began quietly, almost insignificantly, with a handful of photos from a 2018 trip that resurfaced on a niche corner of Chinese social media. At first, the post looked like the typical manufactured outrage the internet so often churns out. Yet within minutes, the tone changed as influential accounts amplified the images with sharply framed accusations. The timing was suspiciously precise. It was a slow news week in August, a period when online sentiment often drifts without direction. But on that day, the algorithm behaved as if someone flipped a switch. Engagement numbers spiked beyond the usual patterns, with the photo posts pulling tens of thousands of interactions in under an hour. An anomaly even for a popular star like Zhang. By mid-afternoon, the hashtags had climbed the trending lists, not organically, but in synchronized bursts that suggested coordinated engagement rather than spontaneous emotion. For Zhang, whose trajectory after word of honor had made him valuable to both brands and entertainment companies, the speed at which outrage spread felt wildly disproportionate to the accusation itself. Still, by evening, official affiliated accounts entered the conversation, shifting public perception from a debate among fans into something far heavier. Once those accounts spoke, neutrality ceased to exist. The narrative was redirected into a question of political sensitivity, a tone that leaves no room for nuance in China's cultural climate. Meanwhile, fans scrambled to provide context, posting timestamps, travel records, and explanations. But every attempt at clarification drowned under a tidal wave of new accusations pushed upward by the algorithm. Within the first 12 hours, the story morphed from concern into national outrage. The next morning, traditional media joined in, publishing articles that read like pre-written scripts, appearing too polished and too synchronized for something that supposedly erupted overnight. The momentum was unmistakably one-directional. Each new post escalated the stakes. Each headline intensified the pressure, and each official phrase hardened the stance against him. By the end of the first 24 hours, the situation had already moved far beyond public opinion. It was no longer a conversation, it was a verdict. Yet what made those initial hours so alarming was not only the scale of the backlash, but the precision with which it unfolded. Everything spread in neat, predictable waves, almost like a controlled release, allowing no opportunity for a counter-narrative to survive. Inside the industry, executives whispered about how unusual the timing was, how unlikely it was for a 3-year-old photo to trigger such ferocity without someone helping shape the direction. What happened in those first hours set the tone for everything that followed. A storm that grew with unnatural speed, collapsing the boundaries between online fury and institutional authority, turning what might have been a manageable controversy into the opening act of a career-ending crisis. Once the outrage reached critical mass, the machinery behind China's enforcement ecosystem moved with a precision that felt almost mechanical, revealing how fast a coordinated takedown can unfold when social pressure and institutional authority intersect. The first visible shift came from Weibo, the platform that serves as the pulse of Chinese entertainment. Within minutes of the outrage hitting its peak, Zhang Zhehan's name was flagged, and searches began returning fragmented results instead of full threads. That was an unmistakable sign. The platform was preparing for a full suppression cycle. Soon after, the trending list recalibrated itself, pushing aggressive hashtags upward while burying fan-led clarifications, creating an information landscape tilted entirely in one direction. As this happened, Douyin and other short video platforms adjusted their algorithms to reduce the visibility of clips featuring him, a subtle move that often precedes harsher measures. By the 36-hour mark, those subtle shifts transformed into something far more explicit. Music platforms removed his songs without explanation. Drama sites quietly restricted access to projects where he had major roles, and even variety shows he had once appeared in began disappearing from recommendation lists, as if every trace of him had suddenly become a liability. What made this moment particularly striking was the speed at which commercial brands reacted. In ordinary scandals, even major ones, companies typically wait for internal risk assessments and PR guidance before severing ties. But in Zhang's case, more than a dozen brands terminated partnerships almost simultaneously, canceling over 260 million yuan in endorsements as if they had anticipated the need to act decisively. Contracts that normally require days of negotiation to unwind were voided in hours, suggesting a climate in which hesitation was riskier than action. These brands understood a simple truth. In China's entertainment industry, when a narrative becomes politically charged, corporate survival depends on distance, not accuracy. While companies scrambled to erase their association with him, platforms escalated their own measures. Major streaming sites began removing his dramas entirely, not just restricting them. This was unprecedented. Even actors involved in far more severe scandals rarely saw their entire portfolios vanish overnight. Yet here, entire episodes were pulled without notice, thumbnails replaced with blank screens, and search bars returned 0 results for his stage name or real name. It was a form of digital erasure that few celebrities had ever faced at such speed. Behind the scenes, this process followed a familiar yet rarely discussed structure, the ladder of soft ban and hard ban enforcement. The soft ban removes visibility and reduces recommendations, preventing a celebrity from gaining traction without officially punishing them. When matters escalate, the hard ban activates, which involves platform-wide removal, archived content being blocked, contractual documents being seized or frozen, and search results being cleaned. Zhang moved from soft ban to hard ban in under 48 hours, something that normally requires weeks of escalating controversy. The swiftness of this escalation indicated not only heightened sensitivity, but an ecosystem operating in near real time. Even within the industry, professionals were stunned. They recognized signs of centralized coordination because no individual platform can make such sweeping moves alone. It requires a synchronized response from multiple sectors, each reinforcing the other to ensure no contradictions appear. What was even more telling was how quickly narrative control was tightened. Articles that once allowed debate shifted tone into absolute condemnation, using uniform language across outlets that seldom adopt identical phrasing unless receiving aligned guidance. Attempts to defend him or contextualize the photos were throttled at the algorithmic level. Thousands of posts disappeared without explanation, and users who attempted to push back reported sudden account restrictions. In less than 2 days, the digital landscape had transformed into a controlled narrative funnel where only one conclusion was permitted. For ordinary viewers, the sudden flood of punitive actions created the impression of overwhelming consensus. Yet this appearance was largely shaped by an ecosystem designed to eliminate dissent before it could form. As the 48th hour closed, Zhang Zhehan's career had shifted from a momentary controversy to a full-scale industry shutdown. Every gate that once allowed him access to mainstream entertainment had shut simultaneously, and the speed at which it happened revealed a deeper truth. This was no longer about a photo or a misunderstanding. It was about an entire system operating with unified urgency, leaving no crack through which an alternative explanation could survive. That atmosphere of compression, where information collapses into a single narrative, would set the stage for even more unsettling questions about who initiated the escalation and why it unfolded with such ruthless efficiency. As the pressure intensified, the question that began surfacing quietly among industry insiders was the one no public discussion could touch. Who actually triggered the 72-hour collapse? And why did the outrage reach a level of synchronization that looked closer to an operation than a scandal? On the surface, the narrative framed the backlash as a spontaneous reaction from millions of netizens. But the mechanics behind its escalation told a different story. China's online ecosystem is not chaotic. It is structured, hierarchical, and deeply influenced by networks capable of shaping sentiment in ways ordinary users never see. The first layer consists of genuine public emotion, which is powerful but unpredictable. And yet, in Zhang Zhehan's case, the pattern of engagement felt too organized to be purely organic. The second layer, far more influential, is the universe of paid commentary groups. Armies of accounts operated by agencies that specialize in amplifying narratives for political, commercial, or competitive reasons. These groups can manufacture momentum within minutes, flooding posts with outrage, creating artificial consensus, and burying dissent under sheer volume. Their fingerprints appeared early in Zhang's case. Identical phrasing across thousands of comments, synchronized posting times, and engagement spikes too uniform to be accidental. But the third layer, the most decisive one, involves institutional voices whose participation instantly transforms an online debate into a matter of national sensitivity. When certain official affiliated accounts criticized Zhang, everything changed. Once that happened, brands no longer had discretion, platforms no longer had neutrality, and the public no longer had space to interpret the situation independently. What made this specific scandal unusual was how quickly these three layers activated in sequence. Many observers noted that controversies involving politically sensitive imagery had surfaced before without producing such a uniformly aggressive response. In Zhang's case, however, the reaction was not only immediate but strategically layered, moving from grassroots outrage to organized amplification to institutional reinforcement within a time frame so compressed it seemed pre-orchestrated. This raised an uncomfortable possibility. Someone or some entity may have deliberately accelerated the backlash. Inside the entertainment industry, rumors circulated about rival companies threatened by Zhang's sudden rise. His success after Word of Honor had disrupted resource distribution, with several major studios losing contracts and marketing slots because his popularity reshaped the demand curve. Hundreds of millions in commercial value had been redirected toward him in just a few months. And in a system where celebrity influence is closely tied to corporate power, that shift created enemies. Some insiders speculated that certain agencies stood to benefit from eliminating him, not through direct confrontation, but by letting an existing vulnerability become a professional death sentence. Still, commercial rivalry alone could not explain the intense participation of institutional voices. That pointed to a larger context. In 2021, China launched a sweeping cultural rectification campaign aimed at cleaning up idol worship, fandom behavior, and celebrity power structures. Zhang's rapid rise, hyperactive fan base, and sudden cross-industry dominance aligned with several characteristics the campaign sought to control. From this perspective, his downfall might have served as a high-impact example for the rest of the industry, a warning delivered through the destruction of a highly visible figure. Yet even this explanation left gaps. The timing was too precise, the escalation too synchronized, and the narrative too uniform across all major media outlets. Several analysts noted uncanny patterns, articles published with similar wording despite coming from unrelated publications, trending hashtags appearing at identical intervals on different platforms, and comment sections flooded with repetitive statements that looked machine-curated rather than human-driven. The idea that this was simply public anger no longer held. Whether intentional or opportunistic, a larger mechanism had clearly stepped in to guide the storm's direction. What remained striking was how silence was imposed just as aggressively as outrage. Whenever fans attempted to explain or defend him, their posts vanished, their accounts were restricted, and rebuttals were removed even faster than the original accusations spread. If this scandal were truly about historical insensitivity, clarifications should have been allowed, yet the system treated context as though it posed a threat. That reaction suggested that the narrative needed to remain one-dimensional for a reason, one that had little to do with the photos themselves. By the end of the third day, it was evident that Zhang Zhehan's fall had become more than a scandal. It had turned into a convergence point where political caution, competitive interests, and institutional priorities aligned. In such an environment, truth mattered less than momentum, and momentum was controlled by those who understood how to direct it. What happened to him was not just a collapse, but an execution without explanation, performed not by a single hand, but by an ecosystem that knew exactly how to erase someone without ever stating why. As the system tightened around him, the most unsettling aspect of the 72-hour collapse was how completely Zhang Zhehan was denied any opportunity to speak, clarify, or even exist within the public space. In most scandals, even severe ones, celebrities are given at least a narrow window to issue statements, offer context, or let their agencies negotiate damage control. But in this case, that window never opened. From the moment the outrage ignited, every pathway he could have used to respond was sealed simultaneously. His studio released a short apology in the early hours of the crisis, yet the statement was buried almost instantly under a surge of new accusations. Posts attempting to clarify timelines or locations were removed within minutes, and any content suggesting the photos could be contextualized was throttled algorithmically before it could gain traction. What happened next revealed the depth of his isolation. His agency, which should have been his first line of defense, disappeared from public view. Instead of holding press conferences, releasing detailed explanations, or contacting media outlets to correct the record, the company went silent, issuing only vague, minimal statements. Industry insiders later whispered about internal fractures, with some suggesting the agency chose self-preservation over defense, fearing that supporting him would threaten its own survival. This absence of institutional protection left Zhang in a vacuum, where neither official nor commercial allies were willing to risk association. The media environment quickly shifted into a mode that no longer permitted discussion. Articles stopped quoting external experts or offering alternative perspectives. They instead repeated a single narrative that framed the scandal as absolute and undisputable. The language across major outlets became uniform, relying on phrasing that discouraged nuance and painted his actions as inherently unforgivable. It was a rhetorical strategy that eliminated ambiguity and ensured there was no room for reinterpretation, regardless of evidence or explanation. Under normal circumstances, such a high-profile case would generate extensive debate among the public, with some arguing in favor and others against. Yet Zhang's situation unfolded in an environment where counterarguments were not merely ignored, but actively suppressed. Accounts that attempted to defend him reported sudden restrictions, shadow bans, or complete removal. Even neutral posts that asked for official investigation or context were flagged and taken down. The speed and consistency of this suppression suggested a coordinated effort to maintain narrative uniformity. Meanwhile, the platforms themselves escalated their actions from content suppression to total erasure. His dramas disappeared not just from recommendations, but from entire libraries, as though they had never existed. Music platforms wiped his songs, even collaborations where he contributed only a chorus. Even past interviews were taken down, with search engines redirecting queries to generic statements rather than archives. The thoroughness of the erasure raised a disturbing question. Why was his case handled with a level of severity typically reserved for individuals involved in criminal or political violations? More importantly, why did the system move so quickly to ensure he could not appeal to public sympathy? One explanation whispered among insiders was that allowing him to speak, even briefly, risked destabilizing the narrative. If he had presented evidence disproving assumptions or providing context, the momentum of outrage could have faltered. The system responded preemptively by ensuring his voice could not surface long enough to disrupt the predetermined trajectory. This was reinforced by the refusal of major platforms to publish his later open letters. Even after the scandal cooled, his attempts to communicate with the public were blocked or censored, preventing him from regaining control of the narrative or offering his own version of events. But what made the silence surrounding him even more troubling was how quickly his name became taboo in the wider entertainment sphere. Actors, producers, and directors avoided mentioning him, even in private forums, behaving as though any association could bring unpredictable consequences. Companies that once fought for his endorsement money erased him from internal documents, marketing archives, and sponsorship reports. It was not merely a case of distancing from controversy. It was a systematic disassociation that positioned him outside the boundaries of the industry. By the time 72 hours had passed, it was clear that Zhang Zhehan had not just lost contracts, roles, and visibility. He had lost access to any platform where he could defend himself. His silence was not voluntary, but enforced, shaped by a network of systems designed to contain, restrict, and ultimately erase. What emerged from this sequence was a chilling reality. In moments where public sensitivity and institutional priorities align, an individual can be removed so completely that even the right to speak becomes unattainable. And in Zhang's case, silence was not the aftermath. It was part of the strategy. In the weeks that followed the 72-hour collapse, the silence that surrounded Zhang Zhehan did not fade, but crystallized into something far more revealing. A prolonged vacuum that forced the public to question what had truly happened behind the scenes. While the scandal outwardly appeared to be resolved, whispers within industry circles began to paint a different picture. One where the severity of the punishment no longer matched the scale of the alleged offense, and the speed of the takedown seemed increasingly incompatible with any explanation centered solely on public outrage. As time passed, international observers took notice, especially those familiar with the mechanics of crisis management in Chinese entertainment. They pointed out that the system rarely acts with such precision unless multiple interests converge. This realization shifted the narrative from a story about a scandal to a story about a machinery capable of shaping outcomes without ever declaring intent. Meanwhile, outside China, the backlash followed a different trajectory. Fans in Southeast Asia, Europe, and North America questioned the logic behind the punishment, noting that similar controversies involving other celebrities had received far more measured responses. The global reaction created a stark contrast. While China's digital ecosystem moved toward erasure, the rest of the world seemed increasingly unconvinced that the destruction of a career could be justified by a handful of unverifiable interpretations of old photos. As this disconnect grew, attention turned to the broader environment in which the scandal occurred. Analysts revisited the political context of 2021, when cultural regulation campaigns tightened rapidly, and the government signaled a shift away from celebrity worship and fandom culture. Zhang's massive popularity after Word of Honor His booming fan base and his sudden commercial dominance placed him directly inside the crosshairs of a system attempting to reassert control. In that climate, he represented more than a rising actor. He represented a trend that powerful institutions wanted to slow down. This widened the conversation beyond Zhang himself, forcing people to reassess the vulnerabilities inherent in China's entertainment framework. It exposed how careers worth hundreds of millions could hinge on volatile public sentiment, amplified by algorithms and shaped by unseen regulators. The industry began to recognize a truth long whispered but rarely acknowledged. In moments where politics, commerce, and public perception collide, the fate of an entertainer is not determined by evidence, but by narrative stability. Yet even as these structural forces became clearer, the personal consequences of the scandal were more devastating than anyone anticipated. Zhang's attempts to rebuild his career, through independent music releases, public statements, and legal efforts, were met with gatekeeping at every step. His new songs charted internationally, but struggled to surface domestically. His statements reached foreign media, but were suppressed inside China. Even court victories that clarified misinformation surrounding the scandal failed to shift public discourse, because the platforms that controlled narrative distribution refused to amplify them. This disconnect between legal truth and public perception became one of the most striking aftershocks of the crisis. Despite factual corrections emerging over time, the machinery that had erased him did not reverse. Instead, the silence deepened, suggesting that the system had no intention of reopening the case or acknowledging excess. Industry insiders began to treat his downfall as a precedent, a dramatic example of the consequences of crossing invisible boundaries. Agencies adjusted their strategies, training idols to be hyper-cautious, avoiding political proximity, restricting travel photos, and insulating their stars from situations that could be misinterpreted. Zhang's collapse reshaped industry behavior more effectively than any official regulation could. On the cultural level, his case triggered a quiet reassessment among viewers who realized how fragile celebrity status could be. Discussions online shifted from outrage to unease as more users began questioning the process that allowed a multi-million-dollar career to be erased without investigation, explanation, or due process. The deeper the public looked, the more they recognized the pattern. Zhang Zhehan was not the first to be targeted by a sweeping wave of cultural enforcement, but he was one of the clearest examples of how quickly and thoroughly the system could act when a figure became inconvenient. By the time a year had passed, the most haunting aspect of the scandal was not the photos themselves, but the unanswered questions. Why was his case treated differently from others? Who benefited from his downfall? Why were clarifications suppressed even after evidence surfaced? And why did the narrative remain frozen in place despite every internal inconsistency? In the end, Zhang Zhehan's 72-hour collapse became a symbol not of wrongdoing, but of silence. Silence imposed, enforced, and maintained long after the initial outrage faded. It revealed how a system built to manage cultural influence could dismantle a rising star with no explanation, and how, once erased, an individual could struggle indefinitely against an invisible threshold that refused to let them return. His story remains unfinished, not because the scandal continues, but because the truth behind it was never allowed to emerge. In the end, the story of Zhang Zhehan is not simply the story of a celebrity who fell. It is the story of how fast a system can erase someone when momentum, fear, and institutional interests align. His 72-hour collapse revealed a framework far more powerful than any individual scandal, a structure capable of shaping public perception with such force that truth, context, or clarification never stood a chance. Long after the outrage cooled, the silence remained, reminding everyone inside the industry that fame in China is not built on adoration alone, but on boundaries that shift without warning and consequences that arrive without explanation. The brutality of his downfall serves as a cautionary tale for an entire generation of actors who suddenly understood how fragile their standing really is, how a single moment, a single image, or a single misunderstanding can trigger a sequence of events too coordinated to fight. And yet, beyond the politics, the algorithms, and the corporate withdrawals, his story persists because people recognize the human cost beneath the machinery. A man at the height of his career lost everything before he had the chance to speak a full sentence in his own defense, and that unanswered void has become the most haunting part of his legacy. Whether he finds his way back or remains a symbol of an era defined by censorship and cultural regulation, Zhang Zhehan's fall exposes an uncomfortable truth. In a system built to control narrative stability, justice is not guaranteed, and silence can be just as decisive as punishment. His 72 hours of erasure will be remembered not only for their speed, but for what they revealed about the forces that operate behind the curtain. Forces that can dismantle a multi-million-dollar empire without ever showing their face.